It was a typical day. I was sitting in the in the living room of my tiny apartment, surrounded by baby toys. The TV murmured in the background, and I was counting down the hours until my husband got home from work. My 2-year-old son stood on the furniture, pointed out the window, and begged to go outside to play. In my mind's eye, I could see it so clearly. I'd pick up my newborn daughter, strap her into a car seat, pack a bag, and we'd go. We'd go anywhere our hearts desired, the park, the library, a much-needed Starbucks run. If I closed my eyes, I could almost feel the weight of the diaper bag hanging off my shoulder and the weight of the car keys in my hands. I must have sat there for 2 minutes, silently dreaming. But when I opened my eyes, this is the reality I was met with. My son was now crying because he just wanted to go outside to play. And while my daughter still slept soundly, I knew this would someday be her fate, that she too would someday be begging for something I just couldn't give them: freedom. The freedom to laugh and to play and to grow, the freedom to just be kids. So instead, I pulled myself up off the couch, wiped the tears that had somehow started to fall off of my cheeks, got into my wheelchair, and tried to distract my son with yet another book or a game or a movie. And I waited. I waited for someone who could just understand, who could understand not only why I was crying, but who would cry with me because she'd been there too. When my husband got home from work, this is when I really broke down. Because it was then that I realized I had no car, I had no driver's license, and I hadn't left my house in a week. I was 26 years old, and I was tired. We realized then we had a decision to make: either save for a house or save for an accessible vehicle. It wasn't the type of thing that we could save for both of, because an accessible vehicle is about the same price as a house. But I couldn't stomach watching my children stare at a parking lot for one more day. So, after a lot of thought and a lot of prayer and a lot of searching, we decided to purchase a home. And we finally found one. And that inkling of hope that had seemed so far away finally started to return. My kids had a yard to explore and a neighborhood to play in. But as the days, weeks, months, and years passed, that pit of despair slowly encroached. It subtly reminded me that no matter what I did, I had so little control over this life, that no matter what, cerebral palsy would win. And while I was looking out at my own yard and my own kids, not much had changed. Weeks would still pass with little more than a trip to church or a walk to a nearby park. And while I had friends, I had convinced myself that I was nothing more than a burden on their lives. Once again, I found myself just wanting someone to understand, someone who could understand what life in a wheelchair was like. I didn't grow up in the disability community. I was the only girl in my high school and one of few in college. I was alone. But as fate would have it, I was on Facebook one day and I saw a picture of a friend of mine with a woman in a wheelchair. And in the picture, the woman was wearing a sash, and on her sash it said Miss Wheelchair Michigan. I didn't know anything about this or what it entailed, but I clicked on the picture and got into contact with the woman. And she explained to me that Miss Wheelchair Michigan is an advocacy and awareness program specifically designed for women in chairs. Of course, I got super excited about this and decided to apply. But I also made the mistake of looking at my competition. This girl was amazing. She had been in the news and in the newspaper, and I was just a mom. There was no way I was going to win. But I did win. I won the title of Miss Wheelchair Michigan 2014, and I then placed 4th runner-up for Miss Wheelchair America. Now with these new, thank you. With these new titles came a whole new set of friends, and with them, a whole new set of resources. I was talking to one of these friends one day, and I was explaining to her just how isolated I'd become and how depressed. And she told me that there was a service in my area for people with disabilities called paratransit. Basically, it helps us get from point A to point B. Again, I got excited and I immediately enrolled. What newfound freedom this brought me. I could pick up my kids from school or meet a friend for dinner. I could go to a doctor's appointment on my own. I no longer had to wonder what it was like to access my community, because now I knew. Now, 6 years later, my life is different, but still so much the same. Toys still seem to litter my living room floor. There are still days I can't wait for my husband to get home from work. And yes, there are still times I find myself so frustrated at my circumstances. But because I use my voice to speak out, utilize my resources, my life changed. You see, mobility isn't always about movement. Sometimes it's about the need to ask for help. Sometimes it's about using your own voice for power and for purpose. And sometimes it's about recognizing that maybe your story isn't over yet. So maybe you know someone with a story like mine. Maybe it's a neighbor you haven't seen outside in a while, or someone in your social circle with a disability. Maybe someday it could even be you. Offer them an ear. Offer them a smile. Offer them a ride. Help them to get around when they can't, and help them to live through it. Thank you.